Hello and welcome to the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. I apologise for two things. One, until the sun goes away, I have these annoying stripes down me. I'm a bit of a light zebra, I guess you'd say. And Graham McDonald is using an old laptop to do this, and it sounds like someone's shuffling in paper. I don't know. Anyway.
I know. It's raining paper. But I got the floral shirt to make up for your zebra stripes, so
Yes,
I balance you out.
Exactly. The high quality production value of the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap.
You know it.
So look, everyone, welcome back for another week. I hope you've had a good week and a good weekend. I hope if you are in the Hawke's Bay area or around the East Coast that things are going a little better for you. I know that some of the connections are opening up again and life is getting a smidge back to normal for some people. I know that people are still digging out in some places, and we wish you well in doing that. Now, before we start, I would love it, Graham, if we could get just a little bit of an update on the Mustang issue, because, and this shows how we are, how well we are watched. I got a very nice call from Mr. Simon Rutherford, the managing director of Ford New Zealand, and it was a very proactive call where he, I guess, just wanted to make sure that his dealers were looking after people, and I believe he's taken on some feedback. But has that progressed at all? Where you've gotten with finding a car?
Not the finding a car, but the really important part is, and I've got to say, a real bouquet to, first of all, to Simon from Ford New Zealand, and also from Steve Fraser from North Harbour Ford, who both reached out to me, first of all, to identify, obviously, what went wrong. And I think that's the really important part.
Should we be clear here that it wasn't North Harbour Ford that was the dealer that was the issue?
No, it wasn't. We named who it was in the last show, so I think everyone sort of, if you're watching this, obviously you know. But as I say, really good reach out and a lot of effort, I think, putting into, if not necessarily finding a car, certainly going through the process of what went wrong and what we can do better. And to me, you know what, that's the best part about it, is working through and figuring out what we can do better as dealers, because we all do this sort of stuff, right? No one who watches this, who's involved in the trade, can say they've never had an issue in terms of customer service. But the difference is sometimes we don't know about it. And so it was quite nice in a little forum like this for maybe some of these issues to be identified. But yeah, look, absolute bouquet to you guys. Fantastic reach out. We will find a car, right? Or someone will, or I'll find one somewhere. But yeah, we are now Mustang shopping, and I've got all the right people behind me.
Because I believe you're no longer a Ranger owner. Is that correct?
In about 7 hours, it won't be.
Because we've taken. We've used your Ranger ownership in the past to take the piss a little bit, yeah, I guess.
I don't know about taking the piss, Richard.
We've used it to clarify your angle on some issues. The Ute driving Graham McDonald. So I guess R.I.P. the Ranger. We can't use that line anymore.
No, I know. You know what? It showed up, if you remember, a few years ago, it showed up a rather large competitor in that particular space. We took down to my farm on a wet and wild day for some video shooting, and my truck showed up the competition in my paddocks in terms of traction and ability to pirouette itself around the grass. So yes, poor Ranger.
It also, despite being two-wheel drive, did very well when we went off terrain a little bit on a trip up north. It did. Kept up well with the Volkswagen Touareg. So yeah,
it did. Yes.
Yep. Farewell, the Ranger. Off to its new home. Right. Yep. Now let's kick into the news this week, and so we can get this thing through. If I pull up this website now, it is Stats Week, my favorite week. The numbers are in, and new vehicle registrations were hit for 6 by Cyclone Gabrielle in February. I suspect my writer on this one, Jeff Dobson, maybe like cricket. I'm not sure. Recent floods and Cyclone Gabrielle's widespread disruption saw February new vehicle registrations fall by 23.7% to reach 9,541 compared to February 2022, making it the lowest February since 2014. Associated Motor Industry Association Chief Executive David Crawford adding registrations of 6,259 passenger cars and SUVs were down 18.1%, and registrations of 3,282 commercial vehicles were down 32.4%. Crazy to see a number that low after years of just nuts Ute registrations. While registrations of new battery electric vehicles, BEVs, were softer than the last quarter of 2022, registrations of non-plug-in hybrids remain strong, he explains. The recent weather events on the back of a softening economy were a double whammy for the new vehicle sector in the month of February, says Crawford. Now, let's run through a couple of these things here. I think that those ute sales are about to come back up because people held off waiting to see what's happening with the clean car and all that kind of stuff, and there were pre-registrations last year, blah, blah, blah. People are going to need utes soon, and I think they'll start buying them. So I think we'll see that number rise. The vehicle sales, I think we'll see those come back up as dealerships in some areas can actually open and they don't have, people stayed inside when it was wet. And the BEVs particularly. Now, as we know, the BEV market at the moment is dominated by the Chinese assembled vehicles. So Tesla Model 3, BYD Atto 3, MG ZS EV, Polestar. There have been some big ship delays, obviously, particularly on Chinese-built vehicles, stuff going through Australia. Same issue affecting the used car market, but particularly those ships that have stopped in China seem to be a particular problem. And a large shipload of those arrived, I think, this week and been unloaded this week. So I know BYD is sitting on a whole pile of cars they've got to process. So I suspect the same is true for Tesla. So expect that number to go right back up. And I think in March, we're going to see another one of these months where, because of a quirk of shipping, those BEV models end up back at the top of the overall passenger charts again, if not in the same kind of volumes as what we saw late last year.
Can I chip in a 10 cents worth here and say that there's a little bit of a trend? We're talking about sales of trucks and things like that. So we've had renewed interest in things like SUVs and trucks and stuff like that here, and that's not really our focus. So it's not like we're sort of seeing them fire at the door. But I think the flooding, and particularly if I'm speaking for the Hawke's Bay here, but other regions like Northland as well, people are looking at getting back into larger vehicles or higher clearance vehicles. There's that sort of nagging voice in the head says that I'm not so sure about my vehicle anymore that's low slung, small, compact. I'm looking for something a little bit bigger. And we're seeing that narrative coming on through. And I don't think the market for trucks and SUVs, and I'm talking petrol-powered vehicles here, has gone away or is going to go away anytime soon with people's renewed interest in that sector. It's going to be a tough one. If you're a BEV salesperson in the Hawke's Bay right now, you've got to convince your clientele that they're not going to be impacted against such events happening in the future with wholesale lack of power over a period of 5-10 days, infrastructure issues, not getting out to town where you've got structure, things like that. I see a little bit of a blip.
Well, there's one thing I would note there, and this is a long argument, is that the power went on in the Hawke's Bay quicker than most of the petrol stations reopened, and petrol stations don't work without power. So I think there's a bit of a beat up around that. I do agree that some people are looking for more for vehicles with more ground clearance. I certainly know when we had the issues up here in Mangawhai last week, and I was kind of a bit. I would have been happier if I'd had a higher ground clearance vehicle here, because there are still some roads around here which you need a four-wheel drive for, and certainly at the time I was driving up in a fairly low-slung vehicle on the day that the flash flooding hit here, and really I made it home by the skin of my teeth because I was in a low vehicle. So I can see that. The great irony being is that arguably, don't want any hate for this, we're going to be into having people using a storm, which some would say was made worse by climate change, to buy vehicles that arguably could make climate change worse. Have fun with your Mustang, Graham. Moving on to and I will too. I'm sure we'll do a roadie in that at some point.
Wait, what?
You need to buy one from Invercargill so we can drive it up. Now, on to imports. It was another slow month for the import market.
Yeah.
Used import registrations again slumped in February with the market down over a quarter year on year. According to provisional Waka Kotahi figures, 7,762 passenger units were registered for the month, down 27.6% to 7,762. Oh, that's badly written. From 10,720 this time last year. Commercial registrations were down a huge 45.5% to 477. Toyota was top, the Toyota Aqua was top, and the Toyota Hiace was top. I'm not sure we need to go into too much detail there. Interestingly, Toyota was up, was the one brand that was kind of up at the top of the charts, and I guess that's because they have a heck of a lot of hybrids. But am I hearing there might be a little bit of a glimmer there coming, Graham? I hear buying might be getting a smidge easier, and perhaps we might start seeing some more volume coming down.
Well, yeah, it is. Buying's definitely got easier this year. And we're going into traditional month of March. If you know how the Japanese domestic market works, where you've got the March 31st tax time, you've got a lot of cashing up of dealer stock and things like that prior to that point. And we find in the weeks leading up to that, the prices do tend to go down a bit. And we certainly saw January prices came back. February prices came back, not on everything, but on the stock that we Kiwis like to buy. So yeah, buying's been better. The big issue, well, there's two actually. One is shipping. Shipping. Those numbers you're seeing reflect the fact you just couldn't get cars here in February. And I talked about a vehicle that I had bobbing around in the ocean for over 2 months, right, which I got my hands on last week. We've still got cars out that we bought back in November and December in Japan that we still have got nowhere near receiving yet. So the market numbers you're seeing are telling you not necessarily sales, they're telling you about what we've actually got on hand in stock. And look around all the dealers around me have been in the same position. I haven't seen anybody with arguably full yards for quite some time. But it's now changing. The boats are now arriving. We're seeing lots of holdups at the Auckland Wharf in particular through just a lack of port space to get these vehicles discharged. And then the same old story. Compliance centres, they're already all now full, but that tells me within the week or so, the stock will be on the ground, ready to sell, and we'll see those numbers climb back up again. I'd like to see what March's numbers will be like. I suspect they'll be a lot better than February's, without doubt.
Yeah. I guess is it time for people to knock on so give their agent a call and say, let's have a look at what's out there and coming through the system?
I think they already are, but there's a little bit of caution. And again, it's all about cash flow, right? So if you haven't got the stock here and you've paid for it and it's bobbing around the ocean or sitting at compliance, there's only so much money or money circle you can generate in that meantime. And so if you've got, I don't know, a couple of $1 million worth of stock bobbing around somewhere that you normally have on the dealership and you normally have sold and the money back in the tin, it makes it harder to go back to your agent and say, hey, let's buy some more. Can't pay you for it. May not be able to pay you for it for a longer yet, but it makes those connections a bit more tenuous. So it's going to be infrastructure when it comes to logistics, and it's going to be cash flow. We'll see that model start to rotate back around again. Like a spin cycle, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, just literally, I had the email come through while we were talking there. The arrivals for February, we were 5,200 units used passenger cars in January. It's 7,500 in February. So over, well over 2,000 higher there, about 2,300 higher. Still down on December, but better than most of the months in the last quarter of last year. I mean, we were September 5,000, October 5,000, November 6,200, December 9,700, Jan 5,200, and then 7,500 in February. So that's arguably a little bit of a positive look there. And it all happened.
It all happened in the last week of the month. So we saw a lot of vehicles turning up in that very last week of February. So we're not going to see those numbers reflected in sales yet, but March, I think we will.
Yeah. So talk to your agent. Perhaps it is time to get a little more aggressive in seeing what you can get on the yard, basically. That's a good one to look at. Now, if we're looking also at vehicles and damage and money that could be flowing through, there is this story that came out at the start of the week. Dealers urged to consider CCS charges for flood-damaged vehicles. And this is a bit of an interesting one. Dealers are being reminded that Clean Car Standard charges may still apply to flood-damaged vehicles, and this should be considered when making insurance claims. That's according to a recent update from Kotahi, advising industry that a vehicle which has been accepted by the CO2 account holder is subject to the rules of the CCS. This means if there is a charge on the vehicle, it remains an obligation even if the vehicle is now written off. If an imported vehicle has not completed entry certification and not been accepted by the CCS account owner, its replacement cost for insurance purposes remains unaffected by CCS. One part of the recovery from Cyclone Gabrielle is the issue of insurance and loss adjustments for flood-damaged vehicles. The CCS is a new aspect of the vehicle business and so may not be front of mind as work is undertaken to restore people's lives and businesses, but it is relevant. Importers and dealers holding damaged stock subject to insurance claims should be discussing the value of the claims with their insurers if they are looking for full cost recovery. There you go. So when you're putting through your claims on your damaged stock, make sure you include the cost of the CCS charges in that.
Well, that's going to be a tough one because I imagine our insurance here, for example, and my insurance that I carry is no different to anybody else's. So your work effective, when it comes to a total loss, it's calculated against the cost of the unit, so the landed cost or the purchase cost of the unit. Improvements are a tricky one. Most commercial insurers have a very tricky relationship around improvements. But I'll guarantee that a prospective charge like CCS, for example, will not be factored into your policies. And good luck on us trying to argue the point that a charge we've not yet incurred for that vehicle, because don't forget, we're looking at June, right? Your insurer will not allow that on your claim made against the proof of wholesale value of that stock unit. It's a whole new grey world for importers to work through. And I'd love to hear, in fact, between now and the next show, come back to Richard. Let Richard know what your experiences have been around the insurance industry so far, because I think it's really relevant for our trade to see some real world examples of how those are being treated. Because the value, as we know, it's in many cases, it's a 4-figure CCS value, which you're talking about against your unit. And that's a lot of money. If you've lost, let's say, making a claim for 10, 15, 20 cars off your yard that have been total lost, and they've got a CCS value, that could be easily between $15,000 and $20,000 worth of CCS value that you're going to have to stump up for a unit that you haven't made a claim on.
Mm-hmm. So I think talk to your broker, talk to your insurer. Even if it's too late for now, make sure it's included for the future. And yeah, it's a key thing to do.
Well, I think also NZTA probably has a sort of brickbat, is these sort of things should have been considered. And I'm surprised in a way there hasn't been more noise made from the industry about why this consideration hasn't been taken into account and whether NZTA would actually look at this as part of because you think about the way CCS works, whether there's some sort of exemption process that could be applied to a vehicle that clearly has been, if you like, defleeted prior to its usage and therefore emissions in New Zealand.
I guess the issue is we're not Australia where a written off car is written off. I mean, in New Zealand, a written off car is simply, it's just an insurance term. And I know plenty of vehicles in this latest damage where water touched the tyres, and so the insurance company, to save time, has just written it off. And those are cars that could quite easily re-enter the fleet. So arguably, under the rules of the scheme, money needs to be paid on them. And I suspect it's easier for the NZTA just to make this ruling, make it the insurer's problems. The money comes in, then it doesn't matter whether the car's in or out. It's just dealt with. Is it fair? Probably not. Is it the simplest way to deal with it? Yes. So, devil's advocate. Yeah. I think that shouldn't be, but I'm saying I can see why they've done it. That photo there, that was actually my street in the Mangawai flash floodings the other day. So, and that was before it got higher. So, got up almost to my letterbox, but yeah.
Oh no! Help! Like Richard, I can hear all these dealers right now in Napier going, "That's nice, Richard. That's nice."
Yeah, exactly. No, we weren't particularly badly affected here. There were people badly affected in Mangawhai. One of the teachers at the school, her house slid down a hill and landed on her van. Yeah. So you got to feel for people. And yeah, there's been people whose business have been quite badly affected by not being able to travel. Right, now, Farmer, the top Audi dealer for 2022. Audi New Zealand announced the winners of the Audi Excellence Awards for 2022, with Farmer Audi taking the top dealer spot. I won't run through the details there, but pretty much they cleaned up the awards. They did really well. That's the Farmer team there. We're incredibly satisfied with such a successful result across the board, dealer principal Blair Wolford says. We're particularly thrilled that some of our newer Audi staff have won awards for their individual categories. Dean Sheed speaking to the group there. Our Audi General Manager Dean Sheed congratulated all the winners, singling out the Farmer team for their outstanding result. Audi Excellence is simply about celebrating exceptional business performance, says Sheed. Our program rewards those that deliver outstanding results across the metrics that we apply, from customer service, technical, marketing, right through to sales results. That's, yep. If I'm not going to run through them all, but you can see them there. We had people from Archibald's, Giltrap Audi, Farmer, Continental Cars, Giltrap, a lot of Farmer, a lot of Ebbett, a lot of Farmer again. Yep, It was a good night for them, I would say. Now, on to a story of I Picked It. A while ago, we discussed Keith Andrews picking up BYD. They've got that big new facility up in Whangarei, and I was sitting there going, these guys are going to be one to watch. They're going to pick up more brands.
Drum roll, please, Richard.
Yep. So Keith Andrews has picked up Ram and Jeep for Northland. Now, that makes a lot of sense. BYD, which they'd already picked up, is distributed by Atico, the distributor for Ram and Jeep. Having spent a bit of time in Whangarei in recent years living in Rangawhai, that place is full of cashed up tradies, and cashed up tradies love Rams and Jeeps. So almost as much as they love pretty much as much as they love their Utes, I guess.
I can see there being a need for two separate customer lounges. The BYD customer lounge and the Ram customer lounge.
Yeah. My hearing's just been blown there, Ram. Of course, there's an electric Ram coming next year, so let's see how we go with that. Northland is looking to purchase a new Ram truck or Jeep. Will no longer need to travel to Auckland to do so, following the addition of the two brands to the Keith Andrews Whangarei dealership. Keith Andrews' full sales, parts and service dealership at 21 Rewa Road now includes Jeep and Ram alongside the recently added BYD vehicle range and long-standing Mercedes-Benz vans offering, all of which feature EV or hybrid options. The dealership is led by Whangarei local Max Sykes. That's a cool name for a dealership head. Who started at Keith Andrews as a mechanical apprentice and has risen through the ranks with 2 International Mercedes-Benz Service Manager of the Year awards to his name. We are really proud and excited to extend our passion and expertise in this area to include these 2 new premium brands for our customers in Northland. So they've got a fairly good stock of vehicles there to sell now, I guess, and I'll just be interested to see what they pick up next. Because I said it before, I still think Keith Andrews is one to watch. They are big in the commercial space, and I think they've got their eyes on a few more passenger cars.
Every second trucking client of theirs that walks in to order himself a new Fuso is going to say, look, you know what? When you get that new 8x4 with a stock crate on the back, you could put a new Ram in the back of that one as well. Have you thought about that? They're going to sell a imperial measure shit ton. You just know it.
Can you invoice my Ram as Fuso parts?
I'll bet you could.
I worked at a service station as a young man back in the days before fully computerized fuel and billing systems, and one of the truckies that would pass through Paraparaumu where I was working would include all his cigarettes. You'd basically have to sit there and work out how many litres of diesel you added onto his truck tank to buy the cigarettes. So, we here at Auto Media Group do not encourage fraud.
No, exactly not.
Right. Now, automotive industry veteran Ian Gibson announces retirement. Ian Gibson, a well-known figure in the automotive industry for almost 2 decades, has announced his retirement. Gibson is synonymous with BMWs in Auckland and has been involved with almost every marque in the industry. He began his career in 1985 at Team Macmillan Ford before moving to South Auckland Ford and later on to Manukau Nissan under the management of Giltrap Group and Peter Farmer. In 94, Colin Goodrich asked Gibson to go to Schofield Holden, where he worked for 5 years. They then established their own little used car business, Motor City, in 1999. The business took off, specialising in Japanese sports cars, Supras, Evos, WRXs, and some Europeans. They then moved to Newmarket European and took on the Kia franchise. The thriving business had a roadblock in 2004 when the Crown wanted to move the viaduct 15 metres to the east, which ultimately led to the closure of the business. After a year off, Gibson was offered a position at Team McMillan BMW as the used car manager. He worked his way up to become managing director in 2014, and then of course he took 50% of the company, developed a new dealership out in East Auckland, and developed a new mini dealership. It's been a big effort for him there. He was approached recently and has sold the business to Autosports Group, which we've reported previously in AutoTalk, for a value of $70 million. Feel Ian, I think that he is off for a proper retirement. Good to see someone who's worked on both sides of the trade. He's worked on very much the new car side, but also had his own used car operation done very well. If those numbers are correct, he's going to have a very comfortable retirement, hopefully he enjoys his time. And I've sorry, down there.
I was going to say, just while you're
wife's grabbing the car key.
What a stellar career, though. Look at that list. What a stellar career. If you could finish up your time in the automotive industry with a CV like that, you could rest, not just financially, but just in terms of what you've achieved. He can sit back happy. Well done.
Now I say he's retired. Saying marks the end of his time in the automotive industry. Will he stay retired though? Because how many times have we seen successful car dealers retire and then get bored after a year in Pauanui and come back and start pottering around some little yard selling a few euros or pottering around someone else's business? It's so common. It's
6
in your
months.
blood.
6 months it'll be. Yeah, not a year. Yeah. That's way too long. Exactly. It is. You mainline this business. You inject yourself in the morning with car blood before you head back out to work again.
It's like, I'll just take one little cheeky buying trip up to Japan or Singapore. It's just a holiday. I'm just going to have a look. Yeah.
Help a mate out on a yard on Friday afternoons. Needs a bit of a hand, just pot around, organise the paperwork for him. Mm-hmm.
Yep, exactly. It's just like a certain large used car company shareholder recently who left the company, went on just a wee look around Japan, and suddenly there's companies out there very similar to his previous brand.
Could be a couple letters in the name, that one, do you think?
Right. Heartland reports a strong half-year profit. Heartland Bank has announced a strong half-year profit for the period ending December 31, 2022, with a net profit of $48.7 million, up $1.1 million from the same period in the previous year. On an underlying basis, the NPAT was $54.7 million, showing an increase of $7.6 million compared to the underlying NPAT in first half of 2022. The motor finance sector was a standout performer, experiencing growth of 10.9% to reach $1.46 billion in receivables. So that is impressive. I think we are going to see more strong finance company profits and hopefully commissions coming through conversely, because as we've discussed a couple of times now, with mortgage rates up, people are realizing that car finance dealer finance is arguably a better way to fund their vehicle purchase.
Yes.
We've seen massive increases in applications for vehicle finance. Mortgage rates going up is not all bad for the industry. Is that something you guys are seeing at your end, Graham?
Yeah, I couldn't echo that more. Dealer finance comes back into its own, and I'd also say that your ability to sell things like gap insurance and LPI has had a renewed little kick. Thank you, Consumers Institute. We'll actually get on and protect our customers for the next couple of years now for events coming forward, just for a change. But on that point, I heard a couple of days ago, the figure of vehicles lost now to flood damage is estimated now to be somewhere around between 10 and 11,000 insured vehicles. And I'd say there's probably at least 2,000 or 3,000, maybe 4,000 vehicles lost that aren't insured. The numbers are just staggering. And if you want to try and make something out of a very bad situation for a lot of people, that's a lot of replacement vehicles that we're going to need to supply to people in the coming month or two. And most of them, you know what, they're going to need finance and need really good financial products to get them through the position that they find themselves in.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also going to be an interesting time for some of those to be financed too, because they may have had unusual costs they've had to bear because of the floods, and if your car's gone, then chances are you've had some issues with the house, so you might be having to process someone through finance companies that's suddenly eating out a lot in restaurants and staying in hotels, and having unusual costs. So hopefully that can be worked through the system. I know we've had some alleviation in the issues around the the triple CFA. So many C terms to deal with this year. So you're going to be really having to work with people over the next little bit, but there will be that business to come through. Right, on to another one, and I guess a bit of a dar. And this is one that this is one people can listen to regardless whether they believe in man-made climate change or not. Maureen Pure, I'm talking to you. Vehicle emissions contribute to health impacts. Emerging evidence shows exposure to two human-made air pollutants is associated with significant health impacts, says Stats New Zealand. The indicator Health Human Impacts of PM2.5 and NO2 reports on the health impacts associated with exposure to PM2.5, fine particulate matter less than 2.5 microcentimeters in diameter, and NO2, nitrogen dioxide, from human-made air pollution, the latter mainly from vehicle emissions. The new indicator focuses on PM2.5 and NO2, the air pollutants known to be of most concern in New Zealand. It expands on a list of health impacts to cover estimated childhood asthma prevalence and hospitalizations with exposure to human-made NO2 air pollution. The report shows the proportion of Kiwis living in areas with poor air quality based on exposure to concentrations of air pollutants is over there. Let's move down to the actual statistics. Where are we? Of the estimated populations, all ages attributed to the exposure to human-made air pollution in 2016, about 71% of those cases were associated with motor vehicle emissions. Where are we? Further down.
There's a lot of stats in there.
There's a lot of stats in there.
That's an unpacked story.
It's up to 71%, so it's up 3%, which is it's more than 3%. No, here we go. I guess they're just working on the stats now. Anyway, air pollutants bad. That is the key factor of that, and I think this is one of the reasons why the big argument around the clean car standard was it shouldn't be called the clean car standard, because the CO2 thing is not really a case of being clean; it's worrying about other pollutants that are out there, I think one of the key indicators of what I've seen in air quality difference, and I think it shows to people what can happen should you be a little more aggressive with cleaner vehicles, is Queen Street. So I'm not sure if anyone's been around Queen Street lately. Queen Street used to smell and be pretty disgusting to breathe because you had those link buses and so forth running up there on a very regular basis, relatively old tech diesel engines, and the place was sooty and smoky and smelled horrific. Now those link buses are electric, and the air, to my experience, and I have a lot of allergies, feels significantly cleaner downtown. Unfortunately, that means you can now smell the urine, but it's made
it goes downtown, right?
It has made a significant difference. My car has a PM2.5 filter and sensing system in it, and I was driving to town the other day and sitting at the bottom of the harbour bridge surrounded by vans and utes and so forth, and the PM2.5 thing recommended I put it into high clean mode because there was so much pollutant around me. Look, all the, whether you believe in climate change or not, I personally do. Dumping dusty particles into the air where people breathe is not smart.
Well, okay, so you talk about buses down Queen Street, and there's a great example of how we say one thing on one hand and do it on the other. The gross polluters in our local fleets in Auckland in particular were old buses. And I think you hit the nail on the head. If you look at our vehicle fleet by comparison, and even our trucking fleet, which has made pretty substantial strides in recent years towards Euro 5 and coming probably Euro 6 technology, the buses appear to get a hospital pass towards being just old knackers. And without those, that single factor alone has changed the makeup of our streets, particularly the central city. And why it is that public transport, the one thing you'd think you actually want to try and direct people to rather than using their own dirty, nasty car, we're actually the worst polluters of the lot. Stick them all on a bus. And I had the same thing in Sydney. As you know, I work there on a reasonably frequent basis, and I use the buses there a lot. And their fleet is just horrific. You can see the haze out of the back of these things. And it's just really old tech. So that alone, paradox, I suppose, if you like, just get out of public transport, leave the bus at home, take your car, it's probably a lot cleaner. Isn't that all right? Now it's not now again, but if you look back and say your model you use about the link buses is correct, a year ago you were better off taking your car.
Yeah. The link buses aren't really replacing that many cars. They're just only getting around the centre of town. I guess you've got to look at my example of sitting on the motorway at the bottom of the harbour bridge surrounded by utes, right? Most of which were flash shiny ones, probably going to park in the downtown car park or in the car park of a business in Penrose. Most of them, I assure you, didn't have a ladder on top and splashes of concrete on them.
Well, it wasn't me anymore.
Yeah, well, exactly. Is that bus that's chugging down the northern busway is probably a lot dirtier than a single ute or a single car, but that bus is carrying 50 people, and that is potentially why it is still cleaner than the one car. Now, I know not all buses carry 50 people. There's a whole pile of arguments around what AT is doing wrong in regards to bus routes and buses not making it and issues around that kind of stuff. But when done right, it is significantly better, I think, is the point. I guess the key thing is just to remember that what we do, regardless of all the clean car stuff, what we do and what we put on the road does have a real connection to people's health. And that is scientifically proven. Not necessarily because of CO2, but because of other chemicals coming out and particulates. And so that's something to keep in mind when the government is looking around legislating some of this stuff, that it affects kids with asthma. It causes asthma. Or at least triggers asthma. Let's not forget that. I think we just need to remember not to forget that as we work through these things. Now, we are trucking on to nearly 40 minutes, so let's knock through the last two fairly quickly. First one is just a quick look at the Skoda Enyaq that's been launched. We sent Dave McLeod down to drive that. Very impressive vehicle. They've interestingly not launched a model under the $80,000 limit. They've decided that the brand is going upmarket, and so they are. I'll chuck them on the screen. So they are sticking to that higher end. They may have a lower spec version later on. I've got a funny feeling that'll depend on what fleet interest is, because if they can squeeze a version under the $80,000 for fleets, potentially this is the first electric car that will go into the New Zealand police fleet. It's just not necessarily as a pursuit car yet, but certainly for other operations, I'm sure it could do the trick. An interesting vehicle to see added to the New Zealand fleet. Not a bad looking one there.
I'm going to say it's a good looking machine.
Big family wagon too. It's an SUV, but really I kind of see it as a big family wagon that's just a little higher set. And our last one is an interesting one because, New Zealand's kind of done this previously in some ways. Ford has filed a patent for car reposition technology. Automaker Ford has applied for a patent to develop technology that would enable vehicles to repossess themselves if their owners have missed payments. The patent titled Systems and Methods to Repossess a Vehicle was submitted to the United States Patent and Trademark Office in August 2021 and spotted by The Drive. The technology would use the vehicle's built-in data connections to remotely disable components of the car to serve as warnings if the owner had missed payments, starting with features like cruise control and the infotainment system, and escalating to more essential functions such as the air conditioning system and the automated door lock-unlock system. If the payment is still not received, an unpleasant sound could play every time the owner is in the car, and the vehicle could lock them out. The patent application also outlines the use of built-in autonomous driving capability to help repossess the car. This could involve positioning the vehicle for easier pickup by a tow truck, or even autonomously driving it to a pre-designated location, such as the premises of the repossession agency, lending institution, or impound pound.
Are you sure Trevor Mallard is in charge of some of these functions?
A patent application does not necessarily indicate production intent. Ford regularly submits patents, or for many companies do, applications to the US Patent Office, but it remains to be seen if this particular technology will be developed and put into use. So if you don't pay your car, it'll drive itself back to the impound lot. This is not unheard of. We, of course, have had controversially systems in New Zealand where the company could remotely disable a vehicle should you not keep up with your patents. Very controversially. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I was for that system and I'm for this technology because what it allows them to do is it reduces risk, which thusly can reduce lending costs. And it also allows people who maybe have had some issues with credit before to get back on track with a little more comfort for the lender. So I think it's interesting. I can't see Ford necessarily doing too many repositions through this. I'm not sure how far down the track with this will get, but it's interesting nonetheless.
It'll tune all your radios to Radio New Zealand or Magic Talk. It's like, pay the bill down!
Yeah.
No, nothing new. The self-drive bit, there's been some US media about it I've been reading, and it just, people are absolutely going nuts about it. Nothing upsets an American more than the idea that remote control might spirit their car away to Bob's repossession yard.
Imagine if they repossess your car with your kids sitting in the back.
You're shopping. I don't know. You'd wait, that's my burger order.
You're in the middle of the Death Valley. You've jumped out to take a pee on a cactus, and suddenly your car locks itself and drives away. Did you ever sell any cars with those? I'm not sure they really exist anymore, but with those finance interlock systems on them.
No, that was, without sounding like I'm being a bit facetious here, it was kind of third-tier lending type stuff, lending of last resort, and we never got involved in that. We're sort of strictly first-tier, second-tier lenders. But yeah, we saw it, and we've seen it on a number of trade-in vehicles and bits and pieces too. So, and I think it was actually a pretty fair sort of an idea. If you sort of the whole process of ownership through and security, it stops your asset as a finance company, technically speaking, you own, from being used and possibly abused until such time as the bill is paid.
Yeah, exactly. And those people wouldn't be in car. The people who were in it wouldn't be in cars without them. The argument goes, well, maybe they shouldn't be borrowing that much for a car, I guess is the point. But, sometimes a good car is what can help people get back on track, and good credit is what can help people get their credit back on track.
Exactly.
So it's so many arguments in either way. There was a lot of head shaking about it at the time, but I'm on the fence a little bit. I'm on the fence. Yep. But interesting move from Ford there. Not sure we'll see it down here anytime soon. Look, anyway, thank you everyone for joining us. Hope you have an enjoyable weekend of trading. Graham, anything interesting planned?
Yeah, going to sell cars. Like I said, the boats have arrived, the stock's coming in, so we have stock. And then it's off down to the farm on Sunday to find out what to do about 100 fallen pine trees and other bits and pieces too. So good stuff, bad stuff.
If anyone's looking for a large amount of firewood, please call Graham McDonald on.
I've got some redded pine. If I got a deal for you on redded pine.
Anyway, right. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you again next week on the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap.